right, well, it's a few minutes after the hour. I'd like to take a moment to welcome everybody who's been able to call in so far. I'm sure that we will have others joining us as the hour goes on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am going to share my screen here for a moment. Hope everybody can see that. So I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm the current chair of the Fellowship Directors section, and also I'd like to introduce Atul Culinaria, who is the chair-elect at the University of Pennsylvania. He's been a tremendous help this year and will be taking over for me this time next year. So we have a very full agenda today, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to save a lot of time at the end for discussion. I think we have a lot to talk about, including our plans for next year. So first I'd like to introduce Dr. Raymond Price, who's the program director of the neurology residency at Penn and has been very involved with the AAN Fellowship Timeline Working Group. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that process and what the implementation has looked like with AANEM and other organizations that he's been working with. Dr. Price, if you would like to, I don't know if you need to share your screen.
I was going to talk. I figured no slides. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you everyone for listening to this, what I think is a really important issue, and that is kind of getting our residents all on the same kind of universal fellowship timeline. So as all of you know, the AAN put out a position statement going on about 2 years ago where they suggested that all residents should apply for fellowships no earlier than March 1st of their PGY 3-year, and that those fellowship offers shouldn't be given and or accepted till August 1st of their PGY 4-year. This is in line with what most other specialties of medicine or surgery do. For example, internal medicine has their match for cardiology, oncology, pulmonology, et cetera, universally in December of their PGY 3-year, so even later than this proposed timeline from the AN. This is true of orthopedic surgery, other surgery specialties that basically neurology is unique in that it's asking people to choose a fellowship usually with only about 12 to 14 months of neurology experience. And we think this puts a lot of stress on neurology residents, kind of reduces their wellness, and also results in potentially people making less informed decisions, and therefore has some negative impact on fellowships where you may get somebody who changes their mind and tries to back out. You may get a letter of recommendation that's not that meaningful because people haven't had as much of an opportunity to work with those residents because they're only doing it off of a short period of time. And so the goal is to try to get everybody on the same timeline to both benefit the fellowships and the trainees. And so we piloted it this past year in 3 subspecialties, headache medicine, movement disorders, and neuromuscular disease. And I've actually been shocked at how much success we've had. So movement disorders was the easiest. They already had a match in September. They were happy to follow along with the proposed timeline and are in basically universal compliance. The other 2 were not. So headache had a match. They didn't have enough consistency in people going outside of the match, so it fell through. And due to a lot of the work by the AAN and the American Headache Society, they have adapted this timeline for their programs, and they are going back to a match based on the impetus that started from this conversation. So we're optimistic that it will be more successful this time, and they're going to commit to the timeline as well. And then neuromuscular was a heavy lift. They were starting receiving applications as early as August of the PGY 3-year, so a full 8 months before the expected the goal, and they were offering slots as early as September or October of the PGY 3-year. And we were able to work with the AN group, about 12 fellowship directors from neuromuscular programs across the country, and the AANEM, and we've put in place now a system where they don't start receiving interview applications till March 1st, and then they're going to offer slots on June 1st. So not an exact match with the timeline, but we were most interested in giving people more time to explore that. They had to build their own equivalent of an ERAS system on the AANEM, which they have done to basically be an application portal to collect them, and therefore be the AANEM is the distributor of applications that get sent into their portal, and they get distributed based at the applicant's request to their programs of interest. They can communicate directly with applicants through this portal, and this is a big win. And every program in the country in neuromuscular fellowships except for one has agreed to this timeline and is participating. So that's the state of where things are as of now at the AN. The next steps for the next years, we wanted to try to pilot this with 3 additional fellowships, and we were aiming for epilepsy, clinical neurophysiology, and neurocritical care, which is why part of the reason I'm here today is to talk to you about it. But basically, we are going to continue to try to do this in iterative steps and bring in, with the goal to bring in all fellowships programs to be as close to the timeline. I think what we've really learned from the process so far is that this can't be an AAN-driven initiative. We need stakeholders in the individual fellowships, and we would love to kind of create a subcommittee of our committee with neurocritical care fellowship directors to work on this. And we also recognize that the solutions are going to be different in different fellowships, and we don't want to kind of say you have to do it how neuromuscular did it or you have to do it how movement did it. We want to work with you and your society to kind of figure out how we can all move towards this common goal. All right, I think I'll stop. I don't want to be too long-winded. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yep, we have questions.
I was afraid
Dr.
of
Shutter?
Thank you. So Neurocritical Care, I'm sure you're aware, has a match. We open the applications in like the November, December time period. We interview in February through like May, and then we match in June. I guess one of the questions I have, or the primary question I have for you, is that since we are not an ACGME certified program at this point, when we have a fellow who's on a visa, we have an extensive, long process to get it done that we have no GME support usually to help us get this. We're often doing it completely on our own. And by moving the match date back to, I think, did you say August? We might be able to do that because I know that in the past I have been able to get visa things done as long as I start at the latest by August. But that's probably my biggest concern, is how to manage that aspect. May not have much longer that we're UCNS, but many of us will probably keep both ACGME and UCNS certification open for different types of fellows.
Yeah, I think we definitely have had conversations about the time window to get visas approved for residency applicants for fellowship, and we've talked to some government agencies where they say October 1st, if you get it in by October 1st, you should be able to get it done. Obviously, I recognize there's always bureaucracy, and I wouldn't wait till that. Again, medicine does it as late as December, and they still have been successful in getting their visas. But I think, this would be August 1st of their PGY 4 year, so you'd have 11 months after knowing they matched to potentially get the visa. So I think it would still be doable. I think I'll also point out that, neuromuscular's solution wasn't exactly to go to August 1st. They went to June 1st. I actually think, in theory, again, we want to be flexible and we want to work with what works for your fellowship. In an ideal world, the AAN would prefer March 1st to August 1st. But if you guys started opening applications March 1st, interviewing, and then still had your match on June 1st, I think we would consider that as within the timeline as we're considering it for neuromuscular. So I think we're more worried about the upfront time to when people have to make a decision of what fellowship to they're applying, as opposed to when the actual offers are given. So obviously I can't speak totally for the whole committee or for the AAN, but that's my experience with neuromuscular, is that we'd be If you think you need that window to get visas done and keep your schedules the same, I think it would be fine to keep your match where it is and not move it at all, as long as the application opening process was pushed back.
I wonder if from the AAN standpoint, would it be reasonable to view the March, August as an eventual goal that we might work toward over the course of a couple of years? Is that a reasonable approach to take?
I mean, I think so. Obviously, you know, we're obviously trying to advocate for the residents and for the fellowship programs and find, again, a solution that works for everybody where we're all moving in the same direction. Obviously, we're going in an approach where we're not asking every fellowship to hit the same goal at the exact same time. So I think it would be more than reasonable to say Neurocritical Care has moved towards that goal and is planning to move further towards that goal a year from now or things like that. So I don't think there'd be objections as long as we have kind of an overarching plan. I do think if there's ever a year to think about making these changes, I think this is a reasonable year to think about it. A lot of the discussions that we've had in our other groups is that a lot of resident experiences were changed because of COVID. You're going to have residents who were doing medicine during their neurology year. You're going to have residents who didn't have typical outpatient experiences during their COVID time. And as a result, we think we're going to have the most kind of confused residents applying for fellowships this year that we've ever had. And there's going to be, I think, a greater chance that the earlier people apply, the more likely they're going to have a change of heart, given just the less experiences than they've had than compared to previous cohorts.
That may be true. I noticed in the chat, I'm sure since I'm sharing my screen, many others saw the comment as well, but Dr. Sarwal had some concerns about the licensure time frame, and I'm wondering if you've heard that from other groups.
Yeah, again, I think the August 1st deadline is an 11-month window. I know California has a particularly long licensure, which is usually at least 6 months, and so I think it is something we've heard concerns over. But again, I think if we kept it at August 1st, I think that should be enough time for most states to get licenses completed. And again, you know, you're currently doing June. If you kept that match date at June, there would be no change in terms of the licensing or the visa aspect of it, in terms of when you needed to start that process from it. Again, if you're just accepting applications later, I would expect these type of issues with licensing and visas to not be any different than in the current state.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Price? All right, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being part of the discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Ray.
All right, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end to go over what, if any, changes we would like to make for the next match cycle down the line. So I am going to take a moment, if I can figure out how to advance my screen. All right, so this is a slide that was shared with me by Brenda Riggett with the United Council for Neurological Subspecialties, just showing the overall growth in neurocritical care programs. This obviously does not take into account the CAST programs, but I think it's exciting to take a moment and think about where we've been and where we're going. As you can see, this only goes through 2018, but at that point in time, there were 68 UCNS certified neurocritical care programs. And I think we're up to 73 now, although as you can see, there are still more positions available than there are positions that are actually filled, so that there's always room for better recruitment. So in terms of updates from the UCNS certification pathway, I think everybody should be aware that the continuous certification pathway has been implemented and is now underway. So the first CCERT exam is posted and will be available through November 30th of this year. This examination, or this yearly continuous certification process, now will take the place of the 10-year exam. I think that's good news for those of us who are planning on obtaining and maintaining ABPN certification as well. But for your graduates who may be interested in certifying through the UCNS pathway, the next initial certification exam is coming up in November of 2021. So other important updates to be aware of, as most of you know, the neurocritical care milestones have been written and we're in a pilot phase over the course of the last academic year, but they will be required for all programs going forward in the next academic year. Unlike ACGME, UCNS is only going to require us to submit these annually. So that'll be a little bit easier from an administrative standpoint than having to do the paperwork every 6 months. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with the document, the link is here. It's available at ucns.org. So last but not least, the UCNS requires all the subspecialties to complete a periodic review of their requirements every 5 years. So the current or most recent past version of the neurocritical care program requirements were approved in 2014 and they're now up for revision. So we are now in the public comment period for the revised program requirements. They're available through UCNS. I have to say I've gone through them, and really with the exception of the addition of the AOA credentialed residents to eligibility requirements for fellowship training, there really weren't a lot of substantive changes. But if anybody does have any comments to make about the revised program requirements before implementation, please get them to Amanda Carpenter within the next 10 days. I'll try to get rid of that. So moving on to what I believe everybody's probably a lot more interested in is updates regarding the ACGME and ABPN accreditation and certification pathways. So Dr. Robinstein had hoped to be able to be here today to address some of your questions. Unfortunately, due to an unforeseen conflict, he was not able to make it. So I will try to do my best to update the group regarding some of what he's been able to share with me about the process. So I think everyone's aware that the ABPN exam is going to be administered for the first time in October of 2021. For those of you who are interested, applications are available in December and the deadline will be in April. So at this point in time, the sponsoring organizations who are supporting the ABPN certification pathway include emergency medicine, anesthesia, neurosurgery, and most recently, the American Board of Surgery and the American Board of Internal Medicine have come on as co-sponsors. At this point, the pediatrics organization is the only one that I'm aware of that might affect some of us that is not coming on as a co-sponsor to the ABPN certification exam. In terms of board eligibility, the candidates must be certified by their primary ABMS specialty in order to sit for the ABPN exam. And there will be a grandfathering window that will extend for 6 years, so presumably until 2027 after the implementation. So at this point in time, for all of the various candidate boards, including ABIM and ABS, physicians will be eligible for the ABPN certification if they're certified by either UCNS or CAST. And then in addition, there are a long list of practice track requirements, which I'm not going to read, but they are all posted at the ABPN website, basically setting the minimum amount of neurocritical care commitment that people need to have pursued over the past several years in order to sit for the boards. However, as you'll notice, there are some possible pitfalls in this, including the disconnect between the ABPN requirements for eligibility for neurosurgery candidates and the disparity between those and the UCNS requirements. So specifically for the ABPN exam, neurosurgery candidates can perform their residency after 3 years of residency training, and they can divide it up into 4-month blocks. Whereas the UCNS requirement is that residents complete a minimum of 4 years of neurosurgery training and their fellowship must be completed in 12 consecutive months. So that discrepancy has been noted and potentially creates some problems for some program directors who are accepting neurosurgical candidates. We did submit a letter. The chair and co-chair of the Critical Care and Emergency Neurology section of AAN drafted a letter that was co-signed by myself and others from NCS to submit to the United Council of Neurological Subspecialties to petition them to bring the UCNS requirements in line with the ABPN requirements for the sake of consistency. Unfortunately, the UCNS has felt that it's premature to make that change right now, given that the program requirements for the neurocritical care subspecialty have not yet been approved. So where are we with the approval of the program requirements? Well, this is the makeup of the Neurocritical Care Working Group that's been working with ACGME to write these program requirements. As you can see, Dr. Robinson's name is highlighted at the bottom. He's the only neurointensivist that's in this working group, although you can see that all the various subspecialties that were in the original group sponsoring the exam are well represented. What he has been able to share with me is that the program requirements have been drafted and have been returned to the various subspecialty review committees to return comments, and they are in the process of incorporating those comments with the hope that the document will be finalized and submitted back to ACGME for final approval as soon as next month. So after the document is finalized on the behalf of the ACGME, it will be submitted to a period of public comment, which will be announced on the ACGME website, and at that point in time we'll have the opportunity to voice all of the many opinions that we will probably have about this. He did ask me to pass on that he doesn't think anybody will be surprised by the program requirements when they're released, and when they were in the beginning of this process, he shared that he was hoping to base them largely off the UCNS requirements, which would be great because most of us are already familiar with that and in compliance with them. So there are several open questions about this whole process. One is, when are we going to be able to submit applications to ACGME to get our fellowships accredited? So according to the administrators that work with the neurology and neurology residencies and subspecialties at ACGME, they're telling me that we can submit program information forms basically as soon as the program requirements are finalized. However, if anybody hasn't taken the time to look at the common fellowship requirements, they're available here, and it's worth doing because whatever the neurocritical care requirements are, they will incorporate the common fellowship requirements. And you'll note that one of the common fellowship requirements is that basically program directors and core faculty need to be board certified in their specialty. However, there is this language that at the discretion of the residency review committee or the neurocritical care review committee, substitute qualifications may be accepted. So I haven't been able to get an answer yet as to whether board certification through CAST or UCNS will be accepted as a viable substitute while we're in this process before the ABPN boards are administered in October. But I will keep you posted as I learn more about that. So that's the end of what I have to share about the credentialing stuff, although hopefully we'll have time to field some questions on that at the end of the discussion. Atul, did you want to talk a little bit about the trainee survey and the fellowship database?
Yeah, so I'm very happy actually to see such a good representation in this meeting. This is sort of a follow-up from a call that we had maybe a month or so ago, and we had talked about, how we can sort of work closely with the trainee section, which has also been pretty active, as you all know. And one of the ideas was to sort of create a proper database of all the fellowships with a little bit more information than what's available on the UCNS website. And the trainee section has been sort of collecting that information. There are some limitations on that because of the resources that go into doing something like that on the NCS website. So as soon as we have a little bit more information, we will update everybody about that. You all filled out hopefully a survey from the trainee section that is being collected essentially for a similar reason, just to understand what is the difference in training from a trainee perspective. And at the last meeting, if you all remember, we talked about establishing some degree of uniformity and give us a starting point on about this section itself. So I've attended maybe one or two fellowship section meetings in the past, and I know it's been in existence for several years, but I wasn't always clear on exactly what is the role of this section within the NCS structure, and I wanted to explore this, and I think a lot of you voiced this, that we're heading into some major changes that are coming our way in terms of ACGME, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other's programs, and that's what this survey that I'm designing is meant to do. So it just basically gives us a starting point, and you should be on the lookout for that. Hopefully in the next week or two, you should receive an email from NCS. It's not a very long survey, but I would appreciate if you would complete that, and also encourage others who are not on this call to complete it for us.
All right. Thank you, Atul. So the fellowship database is one thing that we are hoping to get accomplished over the course of the next year or so. We have a budget proposal in that we've submitted to NCS to try and get additional funding and support to hopefully what I would like to see is that we will develop a comprehensive searchable database that will allow us to provide applicants who are looking for neurocritical care training opportunities with the full breadth of, truly comprehensive database, including research opportunities, clinical fellowships, and hopefully eventually even international opportunities as well. But we're hoping to start small with the existing programs and then build this as we go on. But we haven't heard yet about the budget proposal, so hopefully we'll have some information about that soon. So just to mention quickly some of the other things that are going on within the neurocritical care education realm. So as Atul was mentioning, I think we both learned a lot over the course of the last year about how the fellowship directors section fits into the larger NCS structure. So I wanted to share some slides that Tissy Green loaned me. She's one of the NCS staff members who conducted the orientation for new chairs earlier in the year, and I found them very informative, and I thought it was worth sharing a couple of these really quickly. So one is the strategic plan goals for 2020 to 2022. And I won't read all these to everybody, but I'd like to highlight that basically 30% of them are related to education and training. So as you can see, strategic goal number 2 highlights the role of the educational community in neurocritical care. And that is important because the priorities and the funding of different projects are predicated upon their alignment with the strategic plan. So this is a diagram of the Neurocritical Care Society structure showing that the board of directors and executive committee and the officers provide oversight, but as you can see, there's quite a large number of committees as well as the sections, which is relevant because the committees and sections are supported on basically a tiered structure depending on what their charge is. Ranging from full support, which includes project management and budget support and so on, to basic support, which unfortunately is where the fellowship director section lives. And the reason I bring this up is because hopefully when we get to the end of the slides, which should be soon, I'd like to talk a little bit about what our priorities should be for next year and what projects we would like to prioritize as a group. But it's important to recognize that the projects that we choose to implement or work towards are going to need to be fairly homegrown. So we have to identify working groups, and it's going to be largely volunteer driven. But in part because of the recognition that, for instance, sections don't have as much support as they would like, but also out of recognition for the fact that there are quite a bit of needs within the community of clinician educators within neurocritical care that don't, strictly speaking, pertain to fellowship education. We have proposed a new committee that is largely Dr. Schutter's brainchild. This is something that she's been working on for several years, and I was privileged to sort of help move this forward a little bit this year. So this is the Neurocritical Care Training Committee, which is intended to help address some of these credentialing and certification issues as well, not just within physician education, but also as a multidisciplinary organization to help oversee and coordinate educational issues throughout the neurocritical care subspecialty. So the rationale for moving forward with this new committee are that there are a variety of groups that are vested in education within the NCS, but they are very decentralized and may not be fully aware of each other's activities. Furthermore, we're hoping that this new organization will provide work as a liaison between many of these credentialing organizations, particularly as the credentialing landscape becomes increasingly complicated, and help to ameliorate some of these concerns about the impact on both existing programs and the trainees. Furthermore, we're hoping that this group will help to coordinate with other groups within NCS to provide additional faculty development and opportunities for professional development for those of us who are making our careers as clinician educators. So our specific goals are to increase engagement within NCS on the part of educators within the community, help us to collaborate with Educational Products Annual Meeting Committee and other committees within NCS that are invested in building educational products, and provide guidance and assistance for programs who are working through these complicated processes. So this is essentially a description of how this new organization is going to fit within the existing NCS structure. And one of our stated goals is to try and monitor and minimize the disruption that some of these transitions in the credentialing landscape are going to bring to many of us, as well as to begin to think plan ahead for training standards for our colleagues in advanced practice nursing, pharmacy, and other neurocritical care subspecialties. So this is just an idea about how these groups are going to interact with one another. And as of the June board meeting, this new committee has been approved, and we plan to working on identifying the inaugural members, and hopefully there will be more information about that coming shortly. And that is all I have in the way of slides or information to share. So I'm hoping to open the rest of the time up to the group to discuss several questions that we have facing us for the upcoming year, including what do we want to do about the fellowship match timeline, as well as some of the questions that Atul alluded to in terms of what are we going to prioritize for the upcoming year, and what role we would like the fellowship director section to play in our professional lives moving forward.
Angela, just one other comment on the training committee. So the group here knows it is a multidisciplinary committee. Names were submitted to Wade Smith, who will select the people, but there will be representation from nursing, from APPs, from pharmacists, and from physicians. So this is not, the fellowship director section is still a group that needs to work together because we focus on the fellowship side. The training committee is to look at all of the subspecialties and have an overarching aspect. So just a recognition there that this isn't meant to disband this group. This group is still there. It's just to provide some coordination of processes and standardization across all of the members of our multidisciplinary team.
Yes, thank you.
Any other outstanding issues? We can actually now open it up to the group. Would anyone like to bring something up? Okay, I'll start. So, go ahead, Shirley.
Oh, I just have a question. I know that you folks had been working on trying to harmonize what is happening at the ACDME training level and how the neurosurgical accredited certification is built and how the fellowship works. What was the rationale that UCNS had to not change it? Because it's going to make themselves irrelevant to neurosurgeons by not doing so. So
what they specifically said in the letter was that, so what we had proposed was that they bring their requirements into harmony with the ABPN eligibility requirements, but since the ACGME program requirements weren't finalized yet, they felt that they wanted to wait and see the content of that document before making any changes to their program requirements. So I think they basically tabled it until the ACGME requirements are finalized, which hopefully will be within a few months.
Yeah, this is Tom. The group at UCNS, the board was generally ready to do it, to change to our 3-year, but the idea that we should wait till we see all the ACGME requirements held sway only because we don't know what else might be in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
but it'll get changed.
Thanks. And one of the question is that in that they did not look at the blueprint for the training as well. And one of the things that was identified when the SCCM had looked at the different curriculum across the different specialties that offer critical care medicine, there were some outliers that were not there, like placement of arterial lines. Is that up for discussion in that UCNS? And it's buried within the curriculum on a link, but it's not specifically part of that document.
I think there are probably other things that are buried in the link that would be seen as important. Okay. I don't actually remember that there was any discussion about that.
Okay. So I guess
they use the milestones at all in the UCNS milestones as any kind of foundation or basis. It is in the UCNS milestones. Procedures, including A-lines, central lines, bronchs, are all listed in the milestones.
Right, but that wasn't in the document that was up for comment, and so that's why I'm asking the specific question.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, can only make a comment to Amanda Carpenter and see where it goes from there.
Hi, this is Shri from Duke. So looking at the chat box, it sounds like most of us are not enthused about coming up with a common timeline and delaying the match to the PG by 4th year. So then what can we do for that if we don't find it favorable to our institutional timeline?
Well, I think it's worth trying to come to a consensus about what we want to do for the match cycle to follow the one that opens next month. I think for the current match cycle, we're going to stick to our original timeline. But whether we want to make some moves in the direction of maybe something, a hybrid model, sort of like what the AA-NEM did for the subsequent year, I will put to the group.
Is the big issue moving the, it sounds like our date when there is acceptable for the match is close, but it's when we open up the applications that seems to be the issue that people have problems with. But they can, the applicants can submit their packets up until, what is it, February before they close?
Yeah.
I think each program decides their own
It
timeline.
doesn't close, right? It just recommends that they get them in before February, but they can submit all the way up until the match.
That's a good point. I've seen some come in late and I've already done all my interviews. So maybe it's more of us agreeing a timeline of when we'll kind of interview and when we want SF Match to open up for applications.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I don't get to look at most of them until after the holiday season. You know, I'm getting them, I'm writing letters, but I don't really have the bandwidth during December time period to look at them closely. So I'm usually reviewing most of them in January and then setting up my interviews for the end of February through May time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say 90% of our applications come in before mid-January. And, you know, so similar, you know, between December and January, review them, make my list and offer invites usually around middle of January. and save a couple spots for the straggler, the last 10 to 15% that come in over the next few months.
You know, I think our match is also unique because we have almost double the number of program spots and we have half the number of applicants. And I'm not sure how that plays out, you know, in terms of this new timeline that is being proposed. And maybe in the first few years, you might see more out-of-match positions being taken and less people coming through the match because maybe programs are used to seeing a certain timeline and this could be like a cultural shift for them. And, you know, so I don't know if other subspecialties which have moved to this new timeline have the same ratio, but ours is sort of unique in my opinion.
Hypothetically, would there be support for moving to some kind of a, say, a proposal of January and sticking with June and doing that as an initial step and then seeing how that goes?
Hi, Angela, it's Narissa. I think that's almost the easier step. I think there's less controversy of making the timeline to get applications in later to be in line with the AAN and not touching the kind of match date, at least initially. Similar to what Lori mentioned, we don't really look at applications until sort of after the holidays. And I tried to interview people early in January and very few people interview then.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, we found that if we started interviewing in January, by May, there was so much fatigue. And I think the challenge that a lot of applicants express is that, you know, we set our interview dates ahead of time. When it's spread out over 4 or 5 months, it's actually hard for applicants to get the time off at that if they're interviewing over that course of those 4 months for all of those interview dates. And some of the feedback we've gotten is actually if interview season could actually be consolidated so that they could plan ahead and just get them all done in a relatively shorter time period than the interview season being spread out over a much longer period of time for the purposes of the fatigue, but also scheduling and coordination of being on an elective month or a less intensive month for the purposes of being able to travel. Now, this year might be different because most of the interviews are probably going to be virtual, and so that issue may not be as relevant to this year's cycle, but something to take into account as we move forward with potentially some of these changes in the coming year.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I think those are really valid. I know the fatigue for the faculty interviewing is also.
Yeah, is everyone doing virtual interviews this year, or does?
Atul, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. I don't know if you can.
I apologize. All I was asking is, are people doing virtual interviews this year, or are there?
We are, because that's what's being told to us by our GME, and we follow all the GME guidelines. So yeah.
Same here.
It's going to be an interesting interview season.
We did almost all of ours virtually last year, and it actually worked out better than I thought, both for their experience and given the circumstances. I'm happy to share with folks what we did at, you know, offline, or anyone can reach out to me. But, you know, I think if you can develop some materials ahead of time, what people, you know, want to see is rounds or what the unit looks like. And so if you have educational materials that your GME is putting together hospital-wide to give people a tour, right, if there's a way to integrate a special tour into the ICU, to bring in other folks that maybe don't interview in other years. We often involve our nurse managers and our advanced practice providers, but just so folks can get a flavor of the team, right, that they wouldn't get to see that dynamic otherwise. So anyone reach out to me, I'm happy to share. I'm sure others have opinions. Maybe we can open up a communication dialogue to share what worked last year and what didn't work. Open to doing that.
So with regards to that, what is a decent platform that we might choose to use where all of us are in one group? You know, I know
you cut out there. I couldn't hear you.
I'm part of, I was asking about the channels where we can all be sort of on one platform. I've used Slack in the past. There's other things out there where you could sort of instantly, ask a question to the group and get your desired response. Is there interest in that kind of thing?
Atul, are you referring about from among this section, or are you referring about during the interview process?
Just this section.
Okay.
Just this section, yeah.
Some people have been unable to get the communications that are sent through the Neurocritical Care Society website, and I'm concerned that a lot of them are getting hung up in people's spam filters. So we've discussed if there's a better way to streamline communications among the group.
I think it'd be worthwhile to look at, Emily, in response to kind of your comments, our GME, our whole, of course, I have a large critical care multidisciplinary program. And so we all came together, and we now have an entire package that we send out of videos, introduction to all the units. We'll be interviewing everybody virtually. We have our APPs participate in the interviews. They actually have a major say in who we take. Please don't give that away to all your applicants coming to us. I've had applicants sit in the interview with the APPs and play games on their phones. Those people didn't get ranked.
Exactly.
Yeah, seriously. Somebody stayed on their phone the whole time, and the APPs and nurses came and told me, and it's like not ranking that person. If they don't
it's
realize
a good litmus test of sorts, right? So.
Exactly. That's my litmus test for them. But I'm happy to share the things we put together, but the GME office really helped for us, and it didn't take long. We just did little videos and gave people tours of things.
During the COVID sort of season, we didn't have any sort of tours of the unit, but towards the end, we had a few APPs that interviewed with us, and interestingly, the hospital allowed us to use an iPad on rounds, and so they would FaceTime, and they could actually, it was kind of funny because somebody had to hold up the iPad, but they could see how rounds worked, and we were able to give them a tour. So we might use that this year.
All right, well, I have one other question I'd like to put to the group. We had some discussion on the website recently about the proposal of moving forward with quarterly meetings. Is that something people would be interested in, or that you think you would find valuable moving forward? All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up, so that's good. All right, so I will work with the with TISI to try to get that set up. When do you want the first one? You want to wait till after the holidays, or do you want to try to get one in before then?
When do you think we'll get an update from ABPN? That's probably the more timely update.
That's a good question. I am hopeful that we will hear something from the ACGME about the program requirements, hopefully by the end of next month. So do you want to shoot for maybe early November and try to get it in before Thanksgiving?
That sounds good.
Okay, I can work towards that. All right, well, is there any more discussion, or should we adjourn a few minutes early?
Adjourn.
All right, great. I'm going to put my email address in the chat for those of you that don't have it. And as always, please reach out to me if you have any questions or anything that I can help you with. And I look forward to hearing your comments. Thanks to everybody who was able to call in, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks.